Hello and welcome to episode 5 of That Dance Nerd Show. My name is Danielle Guillermo. I'm your host, and I'm here today with Christie Restrepo. Christie's a former dancer and now financial planner. So I invited her to the show today to give us some tips about how to budget as dancers. But before we get into that, let's learn a little bit about Christie. So Christie, when did you begin dancing?
So I started dancing when I was, I think, a little over 2 years old. Just doing like ballet and tap, and that progressed into jazz and hip hop and modern and all sorts of other genres. And then I danced pretty professionally, and then I ended up going to Ohio State. And I actually was a dance minor originally when I was at Ohio State. But everything that I wanted to do, all the dreams and goals that I had for myself always kind of came back to dance at some point. Mm-hmm. So then I switched to a dance major my junior year. And I pretty much lived in the dance department then junior and senior year to catch up on all my classes so that I could graduate in 4 years. Thankfully, I had already been taking some as a minor. But yeah, so I graduated with my BF in dance at Ohio State with concentration in choreography and injury prevention. And then I moved to New York City with a bunch of my friends that graduated with. And I took as many classes as I can. Fairy dance was where I took a lot of classes at down in like Lower East Side, I think. But it was really hard to keep up the level of dancing that I wanted to, and be able to pay my bills at the same time. And so I actually ended up moving to Puerto Rico and dancing with and I ended up dancing with a small company there called Western Ballet Theater. It was a really, really, really small school/company where there were only like maybe 6 of us that were considered like company members that got paid. And we only got paid per performance. And I was pretty much living off of like the money I was able to save up from New York to move down there. Wow. And yeah, but it was a great experience, and Puerto Rico was beautiful. And then ultimately I decided that, I was going to move back to New York and kind of figure out what the next step was for me in my career.
So what was the next step? What did you do next?
So I actually got certified in Pilates. And I started teaching Pilates in New York, and that kind of turned into personal training as well, just to have a little bit more of a larger market than just Pilates. And I had originally then thought that I was probably going to go back to school for physical therapy, and then that ended up not doing that because I ended up getting pregnant and getting married and all that stuff. So then I ended up moving back to Central PA and starting a family. One of the first things you start thinking about was like money and like where that's all going and where it's coming from and how to plan. And ultimately I realized like no one had ever talked to me about any of that stuff. And so I actually got a financial advisor myself. And she was actually a dancer that I grew up with, who I danced with for like about 4 years at one point. And she had danced very briefly with Miami City Ballet. And then her story is interesting as well. But anyway, I loved the process and was so excited to get the education around it. And I was like, you know what, I really just want people to know that you can do this at any point in life, and ultimately just education around saving and planning for your future. And the sooner you start it, the better off you can be, because it's harder to catch up when you're, already dealing with 20 other things like I was with kids and everything, than if I would have just started even really small, like when I first graduated college. So
you had some thoughts about a dancer's budget. So
Mhm.
can you speak to us on that?
Sure. So I think it really depends what kind of a position you're getting with a company, whether it's something like what I did, where you only get paid for performance, or if you are on a salary, or you're only getting paid for 20 weeks at a year, or whatever the case may be. I think that it does vary. But one of the biggest things is creating a budget for yourself. Now, budget's always like that scary B word. No one ever really wants to hear it. But yeah. But I think a budget in more terms of like, what are your fixed expenses? Like, what are the things you have to pay every single month? Because those are things you can't really change. You can change if you're going out and having fun money to spend, going out with your friends or doing, whatever you do for fun. But ultimately, you need to make sure you're covering your base expenses.
Right.
So coming up with what that budget looks like for yourself and what's realistic, because you also should put yourself in a position where you can save some of your money. Now, most people, if you're coming out of like a college setting and going into a dance career or something, you're probably going to have some student debt, which is also another thing to consider. So usually about 60% of your income is going to go towards fixed expenses. And if you can kind of get it around that frame, that's like a good place to be. Not always realistic, but ideally like that's where you want to aim. And then trying to save 20% of your money, and then the other 20% is for fun. Because you still want to live life now, and
Right.
especially with the millennials and all of us who like to have fun and live now. Most millennials are thinking like, oh my gosh, retirement. That's not even in the radar. But kind of making sure you have your money situated and you're like, okay, well, this is going to be taken care of. And then I have this other money aside to strategize for the vacation, maybe something else that you really are hoping to save up for, kind of getting that mentality of like, okay, I have to really be diligent. Like, okay, I work X for this money. Is it worth spending it on this? And just kind of being like conscious of where your money is at and how much you have saved. So those are kind of things we talk about, or I'll talk about with people on a budget. But it's having those different funds or different areas helps you visualize it a little bit more.
Okay. So your fixed expenses, your fun money, your emergency money.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think as a dancer, it's especially important to have that emergency money. So kind of like the planning for the unexpected stuff. A lot of companies, unless it's somewhere huge like Boston, like a lot of the companies don't have health insurance, or they only give you a stipend or some sort of expense account or something like that. So it's always really important to make sure that you have some sort of protection there. God forbid you can't work for a while,
Right.
So that's really, really important. Because I think it's really easy to say, oh, well, I have enough to pay my bills and go out with my friends and pay my student loans. But you should be saving a little bit of money on the side for those emergencies as well, because that's where you start to get into trouble and then you start having more debt than you can handle and those types of things. So if you have little bits that you're chunking away, and it doesn't have to be a lot. I mean, sometimes I'm telling people like sacrifice one coffee a week, $5 a week, just throw it in a savings account, and start little.
Yeah.
Start little with
Yeah, $5 is a lot less intimidating to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Oh, and I always go to coffee because that's my problem.
Okay. You're owning it. We appreciate it.
I mean, everybody's different. Some people are really happy living very frugally, very minimally. And then there's other people that, they can't go past that shop that has the purse in the window that they really want, or their shoes or whatever, So, you have to kind of get disciplined, just like you do with your training. You have to be disciplined with the way you're saving your money too, and say, hey, I can't, I can't get a day or whatever, but like being very disciplined in how you're utilizing your money. Like the training, one of the things that, and I know this is not even what we're talking about, one of the things that I've always noticed is like all the discipline and the hard work that comes into play, practice, and then the performance, like all of that stuff that you learn as an answer is so instrumental, even if you do transition into something like what I do or something totally different.
Yeah.
And that's something that is lacking from a lot of people in the professional workplace, in my opinion.
Okay.
So like dancers have like this aura to them that is different than most people. And I think that if you translate that into other aspects of your life, money, professionally, whatever, you're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else, ultimately.
Absolutely, I agree. What are your thoughts on side hustles to make ends meet?
So I think it has to be something that, you know, is true to you. So like for me, it was waiting tables. Like, I was a server on the side, like when I was trying to get jobs in New York dancing, and even when I was in college, that was kind of like what I did for money on the side. And it was flexible hours, you know, I could still go take classes during the day and do things like that. You know, there were plenty of people that I'd actually taught Pilates with that were dancers that, you know, they would dance in a company, but then they could teach Pilates. Like, you know, having a flexible job ultimately allows you to kind of, you know, dance maybe a small company or a company that has a little bit more flexibility possibly, that's not so full time. Or like serving is something you can definitely do in the evenings, but then you have to be careful. If you're a company that performs like every weekend, you're probably not gonna want to do something like that. So I mean, I've known dancers that, like I said, do serving, or they teach Pilates on the side, or they might, there was one girl that she like made handbags, like huge into knitting, and she like made all these handbags and would sell them online. So I think that it's very entrepreneurial, like dancers, they come up with these awesome ideas, and they can do it alongside with their dancing. So, and it doesn't necessarily interfere. I feel like that's probably why there were so many dancers that taught Pilates where I was at. Was just because it's good for you as a dancer to do Pilates, and then it just kind of like flows together. So it was like a great thing that you can flow into how your schedule is. So side hustles is ultimately whatever, you know, fits your schedule. Is flexibility though is super important, and obviously nothing that's too physically strenuous.
Right, that's a big,
your best level.
big thing, because your main goal is performing.
And also
you don't want to take
right, absolutely. And then, I mean, also just leveraging your ability to teach or guest somewhere, or, you know, looking at opportunities outside of where you're at too. You know, if you can get a gig where you teach for a week somewhere or a weekend, or do a master class, or, you know, not limiting yourself to just stick where you're at. I think that that's important too, expanding your network.
Yeah.
That can be really helpful.
What advice would you have for a young dancer who's moving to New York this weekend?
Moving to New York this weekend?
Right. They're ready to take on the big city, you know, ready, set, go. What would you pack in their backpack? Like, what little piece of advice would you tell them? Like a financial piece of advice. It can be a life one too, but you want to be whatever you like.
So don't be afraid to have lots of roommates. And, you know, just put yourself out there. I mean, in New York, there's so many opportunities for things that, you know, you never know who you're going to meet. Right. So yeah, okay, you do need to make money. So ultimately you got to find something that pays, but there's a lot of opportunities that if you become like a regular at a specific class or something like that, where the opportunities with teachers that are there every single week, you know?
Right.
But as far as like financially, I mean, in New York, it's so easy to spend money because it's just easier to grab something as you're going. Or, you know, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that I made personally, was that like my first 2 years, I don't even know that I ever cooked in my apartment, like ever.
Wow.
Except for maybe like eggs in the morning for breakfast or something like that. But like I pretty much always was like eating out or grabbing food as you go. And I think that that's one of the biggest things, is like cooking at home, especially when you're surrounded by hundreds of thousands of food options in New York. Yeah. But yeah, it's expensive. So you do have to be careful about, you know, not letting the city mentality kind of get to you, or you want to go out all the time.
Yeah.
And you want to do those fun things. Like you kind of have to be a little bit resourceful, because there are cheap things to do. You just have to kind of look.
Sure. Here, gonna put 45 seconds on the clock. Okay. Ready? I'm gonna show the audience that we're going to begin now. What is your favorite food?
Spaghetti meatballs.
Favorite word?
Perseverance.
Favorite book?
As the Waltz Was Ending.
Favorite movie?
Center Stage.
Favorite ballet to watch?
Favorite ballet to watch? Swan Lake.
Favorite ballet that you've performed?
Roseland Pictures by Alan Line.
Okay. Best vacation you've ever taken?
Did a cruise to the Caribbean.
Nice, nice. As we sort of bring the interview to a close, I did put you on the spot and asked you your advice for a dancer moving to New York this weekend. But do you have any words of advice just overall for dancers coming up?
I mean, I think just general.
Sure.
Probably the best piece of advice for any young dancer ultimately is to, if you want to do something, just go after it and do it. You know, you're only young and healthy once or twice in your life. So ultimately, just like if you want to do it, do it. I mean, I hear so many people that are like, well, I think I want to move here and do this or join this company or whatever. Like, just do it. Like, what do you have to lose? You know? And, you know, ultimately the dance world is so supportive of each other that you'll be fine. Like, that's how I always saw it. And if you aren't necessarily sure where you're going to end up, that's okay too. You know, I mean, you never know where life's going to take you and what one opportunity leads you to next. You never know. Like, I would have never thought, if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would have been a financial advisor, I would have been like, no, I don't know anything about money. But that, you know, so you never know where it's going to take you. And I think that I've seen so many dancers that are so amazing and so talented go so many different avenues and be so successful in whatever they do. So yeah, I would just say whatever it is that you want, just go for it, because ultimately it'll take you where you're supposed to be in the end.
That's great. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for the great advice. I hope everybody listening will take it to heart and get started on their budgets and saving even just $5 a week to start thinking about the future.
Yeah.
So thanks again. And remember that this show is sponsored by Dance Nerd, apparel and goods for those who wear their passion for dance. You can visit us at www.mydancenerd.com. Have a great afternoon. See you guys later.
Bye.